Hey everyone, I am super excited today to have with us another guest on Founder Stories. Today we have the honor to host our dear friend Gareth Jones. Gareth is the CEO of a phenomenal company called HeadStart.io. But before we even get into Head Start, today we're going to focus on Gareth himself. Gareth, who is someone I've shortly got to know, is someone that wears his heart on his sleeves. And if you Google his name, you'll see everything that comes associated together with Gareth is all about human beings are a company's biggest asset, and human beings, people being human is personal. Gareth's motto is all about showing up as your most authentic self. Today, we're going to have a conversation with Gareth all about who he is, how he came to where he is now, and the lessons learned along the way, so we could apply that to our own lives too. So, Gareth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleased to be here. Any opportunity to chat. That's
It's an
my motto
absolute
again.
pleasure. Gareth, I got to know you recently. We had a previous conversation before this, and we had a conversation about today, which I'm super excited about. That more people are going to be able to tap into. When I spoke to you the first time, I got so inspired, and I wish we recorded that conversation. That more people could hear what the wisdom you have to say and everything. But before we get into all the wisdom you have now,
Mm,
in your young age, and everything you've been through, everything has a backstory and a starting
right.
point. So why don't you take us back to your backstory? Your first starting, where were you from, and what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, sure. It's key, the backstory, I think, because it shapes, what happens in your childhood, I guess, shapes the sort of person you are. Um, so, yeah, I'm an unremarkable, excuse me, backstory for me. And my father was an engineer, sort of consulting engineer. My mum was a mum who generally stayed at home but worked in various different times. I was born in Ireland actually because my parents moved over there for my dad's work for a while. So I have the opportunity to have two passports, which is quite handy given the Brexit situation over in Europe.
Mhm.
But we moved very quickly to the Midlands and a market town called Melton Mowbray. And my parents actually took the tenancy and ran the local pub, like the main bar in town. So my dad would work during the day, my mum would run the pub during the day, and then in the evening they would both run the pub. And it was my memories of the place being incredibly busy and noisy. And, I guess it was those were the late 60s. You can imagine what it was like in there. So they were, and they were kind of great parents, but they were very busy. So, me and my brother, and the world was a very different place then. I would at the weekends and evenings, particularly in the summer, I get up in the morning, whatever time it was, and go out for the day, come back, get something to eat and go out again. And that's when, we left that town when I was 6. So it wasn't unusual for me and my brother, who was 18 months older than me, to be walking on our own, to be out in town on our own at the ages of 3, 4, and 5. Just incredibly different environment. And I'm very grateful for that. Society would have a different view on that now, kids that age being out on their own. But so, and that was kind of, that was just my childhood in those early years. But I suppose one of the defining things for me in my early years was moving. So we moved when I was 5 or 6, and only 7 miles away to a small village. So from a big town to a small village, and it may have well have been 700 miles because those are the days of no social media. If you wanted to keep in touch, you had to physically meet or write a letter, and that didn't happen. So at the age of about 5 or 6, I found myself in this alien little village, thinking and feeling very much like the outsider, and people treated me like that. I was the towny kid with my brother. The Head Start as a business, and I'm into, as we spoke about last time, this very much an intent around fairness, and and that's all about inclusivity, and I felt really excluded at that point, and really wasn't happy with my parents for moving me there. But life carried on. We had an interesting time there. My father was out of work a couple of times, which meant that in terms of there was no real safety net then. So a couple of times we had a real bad year. A couple of those years were really tough in terms of income, and again at a very awkward time when I was trying to be an early teenager, fighting my way through that, navigating that, young, discovering girls and things, being, I wouldn't say we were poor, but not having any money was different. It was different. But just 7 years in, after I'd settled in there, and I was no longer one of the new folks and part of the deal, we moved again when I was 14, and that again was difficult because I lost all my friends pretty much. We moved a lot further away, so I had to re-establish myself again, and I did. You do, and actually it was a little bit easier because it was a town, a new town, so people had come from various different places. But I guess those two periods, those moving a couple of times, undermined my self-confidence and made me understand, I suppose, or made me feel what it was like to be excluded and have to fight back in. So I developed this, my response to that, I think, psychologically, was to develop a way of fitting in, right? Understanding what made someone tick. And if I wanted to be accepted, I had to sort of do that. So, and then I stayed there, and, I then went and did my A-levels and went away to college, and again, not an unremarkable rest of education, but I think those early years were pretty defining for me, because they probably embedded a little bit of the imposter syndrome in me, a bit of self-doubt that manifested itself in imposter syndromes when I began work, I think.
Wow. I mean, it's first, it's so true. I mean, the neurons, I was recently reading, the neurons that are get formed when we're a child are the neurons that we associate together for ourselves today as an adult. Mm-hmm. So there's something called the implicit memory, which when we, act out in a situation today, that gets us triggered or something like that. And which could trigger, let's say, example, you mentioned, let's say, example, imposter syndrome. Like, we're coming to a situation today as an adult. And there's no reason for us to have imposter syndrome, but for some reason we had that imposter syndrome. It's an implicit memory from a young child to the age of 5, where we had the feeling of to act out imposter syndrome. And and it's funny you mentioned, because a lot of times every backstory is essentially, it shapes us who we are today.
No, totally. It totally undermined my confidence in the early years, and I felt that as I was, going through the work. My first work, during my career, I guess, but certainly in my early career when I was younger.
Right. And especially you mentioned your father was went through a difficult time, which must have been a difficult period for you also. And the feeling of being excluded, when you can move into a new town, which it should also, it's all these things relate to each other. It's only you think about it, if we live in utopia where if only people helped each other, included each other. And essentially, obviously, the world would be a much better place, but why can't we just do it? Just a simple, basic question. Why can human beings just include everyone? Why can't you just be nice to each other? There's no rule in the Bible that says, thou shall be an asshole,
Yeah. You wouldn't believe it, would you?
Yes. So, you obviously go through this whole entire period, you're coming into your own self as a teenager, going to university, you graduate university, you're looking at the world, and then you're looking for your first job. So why don't you tell us about your early stage career, and then we'll go through everything else.
Yeah, I think probably the thing, I would never, I tried at school, and I think that second time I moved academically was a bit of a disaster, because I think internally I kind of rebelled a little bit, because up until then I was a pretty good student. I did my homework, did my stuff, got my grades, got my passes, I was fine. But at that point, and I think it was all part of trying to fit in, I tried to fit in with a certain group, and they weren't that interested, and I rebelled a little bit. So I found myself, whenever it came to key points like exams, just doing enough to get through, to get into the next bit of education, to avoid going out to work, because internally I thought, I'm going to end up doing, being on a building site, maybe. I don't know what I want to do, so just keep going through education. So I did the minimum to do that. But by the time I graduated, I had changed my mind completely. Those years as a young guy particularly are really difficult to navigate, I think. And my last year was professional exams for HR. So I was I was really spent that year much more engaged in what my career was going to look like, and that actually I could have a career as a professional. This was new to me, right? This education might actually pay off. And so my first job was in a manufacturing business as an HR, personnel officer, and it was a large factory and so on. And it was an incredible training ground from an HR perspective. But I remember when I started work there thinking, wow, how, I can say backward, but how controlling this environment is, how stifling, suits, hierarchy. I'm a low conformist kind of individual, so I'm naturally very curious, and I didn't either take very well to this command and control kind of environment. And it wasn't really about me, it was about the way that everybody else, and there was a particular hierarchy around people on the shop floor, the staff, the knowledge workers versus the shop floor. It was awful, really. And I couldn't get my head around that. But it was a great environment. I sucked up the work. Again, I really, really enjoyed learning and had some great experiences there. And I think that was me blindly just getting into work. But by the same token, what I was doing was I was throwing everything I had into the working life. I was kind of sucking up. This was my opportunity to prove I was good, I suppose, but I was very, very interested. That started me on a journey of just working, probably too many hours, but at that point I was sucking it up. But those early days were I was questioning a lot. Why is it like this? But as luck would have it, it was a business that had been acquired. It was a business that they were looking to turn around as a manufacturing business. And we brought in a guy who was, he'd been brought up on the tools, as they call it, as an apprentice working in a manufacturing business. But he'd made good, he'd gone to university, and he'd become a consultant for then what was PwC back in those days, or Coopers and Lybrand. And he came in and he transformed the business. And what I remember, which stayed with me, it kind of was a light bulb moment for me. He joined when I did, more or less. And his whole approach was to break down the barriers. And he was probably the first guy who walked onto the shop floor in a suit, who wasn't walking onto the shop floor to have a go at someone. He was walking onto the shop floor to go, hey guys, what's happening here? And what do you think of the place? And when things go wrong, what do you think the cause is? And he kind of effectively, in simplest terms, we needed to transform the business. So he kind of turned around and said to the guys on the shop floor, you're the ones who know the best how this is done, best or worse. I want you to help me solve the problem because I really don't know what it is. And under his guidance, I saw people come out their shell. I saw people in the factory that wouldn't say boo to a goose, who'd been there 20, 30 years, getting involved in solving real problems. And 2 months, 3 months later, they're standing up in front of 700, 800 people, presenting the work that they've done, the benefits they've given, and all of those sort of things to the business. And it turned the business around. And that was defining for me, because on the one hand, I got this construct of an organization and the hierarchical stuff, the bit I didn't understand, which seemed to be 99% of business. And on the other, I'd got this example of Joe and what he could do, and the power he sort of wielded just by being human and engaging with these people. And he saw himself as a peer. He didn't see himself as their boss or any better than anyone else. In fact, he valued everybody. And for me, that really started my early career going, oh my God, which is which? I really like this, but I don't see anybody talking about this much. But this bit over here, the vast majority of the way we run the business don't really like, or a vast majority of businesses running like that. So yeah, I guess that early stage was the defining moment for me in terms of trying to really getting into the world of work and understanding what made it tick. And I learned a lot from Joe. It resonated with me very strongly, what he was doing,
right,
how he'd done it.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. You always have that, that career pivot in the sense that you see something. A lot of times, like you mentioned, like, you just think this is the way it is, and it can never change. It never happens. And it comes along a guy like Joe, who's like, you know what? No, let me show you guys that it actually is a different way. There's a
Yeah.
different way how to do things, and which essentially the whole motto, Joe, is very similar with yours. In a sense, take care of the people.
Mm,
People are the most important thing. You know,
yeah.
you don't want to have a place where people wake up in the morning being like, "Damn, I gotta go to work today again. Like I
Mm,
gotta go to the shop floor." Um, and see, like, Joe made that transformation you, which obviously led you into this whole entire career of HR, of making, changing businesses,
mm,
everything over there.
yeah. No,
So,
without a doubt.
why don't you tell us, you go to there, you've been through a lot of, career transformations, career pivots. From my understanding, you've been laid off a few times. You went through a lot of difficult things in different times in your journey. Take us through, the point of, during your earlier career, getting laid off, the emotions that come together with that, you know, and how you like, you've looked back now in hindsight and continue to hold strong back then and now.
Yeah, sure. So I think it started with, so when I did that first job for about 4.5 years, and I learned a lot there. So, and then inevitably I wanted to go and uh, grow, and there wasn't really room for that there. So I got into another job, my second HR job for what is now Nestle Purina, and that was interesting in that I did extremely well there. I got promoted early. I was there for about 4.5 years or so again, but uh, that had a manufacturing part of the business, and I visited that. It wasn't where I was, and they were successful and going through transformation, but they weren't doing it through the people, which was interesting. So I went there with this toolkit that I'd learned and wanted to spread the gospel, and they weren't really interested. They were doing it all by numbers, and they had some success by that. But that period there, although it was very successful for me, I did really well. I ended up after 4 years really questioning whether HR was the best place for me, because I couldn't see this organization. It was saying, and so were others, people are our most important asset, as we discussed earlier. But I couldn't see it as lip service. I couldn't see it being really there, in the heart. And so I made, I guess I laid myself off the first time. I made this decision that either this HR stuff is just fluffy nonsense, and really it's just about being tough, and you just need to get with the program, Jonesy. Um, or there is something in it. It's just that it's only a small fraction of the people believe it. So I was thinking about getting a job outside of HR, and a search and selection company that was working for me. We were looking for some senior roles across Europe. I got to know them really well. They said, "Why don't you come work for us?" And I guess in my sort of period of frustration, I said, "Yeah, why not?" So I just went and I left the HR profession, and that started a much longer journey for me. And and here's where I am today. I'm now running a business, which was my ultimate goal. Have been for 3 or 4 years, and I've run a business before for this too. But that was the start of this jumping off a cliff. And I think the challenge with that was that, having grown up the way I did, with this, sense of lack of confidence and everything else, then bizarrely I was undermining my or stretching my self-confidence by moving out of everything that I knew. I was taking a huge risk with my career. Um, and that was probably the biggest initial transition point. And initially it was great. I did a year. I liked it. I thought it was going to go well. I thought it was great. And then I got sidetracked into technology, which was another kind of positive journey, because we were looking for tech, because I couldn't believe how bad the environment was. That got me into the dot-com boom. And then it all kind of just fell apart, because the dot-com boom went bang, and the company I was involved with was where I first got fired, because the guy who ran it was a megalomaniac, and um, we didn't see eye to eye, and particularly didn't see eye to eye with one of my colleagues, and he thought because we were close, he should get rid of me as well. Now, ironically, um, someone with low confidence, uh, my nightmare was security and losing my job. And at that point, I'd just got family, just had a baby, and that was my complete nemesis, that I might lose a job. And at that point, I thought, you idiot, you left a great career in HR. You should have just kept your head down, sucked it up. You'd be, another 3 years under your belt, etc. And my dad, I remember saying to him, why do you give up your corporate career? I was like getting it from all angles. But my worst nightmare had kind of come true. Here is a guy, I moved away from what I knew, took a whole big bunch of risks. I've got myself mortgaged, not mortgaged literally, but I've got a family on the way. I've got to try and work about house. I've got all these things going on, and I haven't even walked out of a job. I've been fired. My worst nightmare. So all of my insecurities were screaming, obviously. I for weeks I was lying awake at night, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and so on. But I got through it. I went out there, I found another organization and another job, and I actually went through a series of different things at that time. And I faced my demons. Right. I had to. And actually, it worked out okay. The world didn't end. There was something else around the corner. And when I look back on it, for me, that was, I'd almost ripped up the whole thing and thrown it away. But I managed to step out of doing HR and step into more commercial jobs. And, I think I worked with a coach once, and I kept saying, I was really lucky because I left there and did that. And I was really lucky because I went from there to there, and really lucky. And she kept saying, why do you keep saying luck? What you're doing is you're engaging with somebody else, and somebody else is seeing your potential and saying, why don't you come and work with us? And that was a bit of a light bulb moment, that I kept writing stuff off to luck. Again, your natural psychology is to write yourself down, right? Is to go with what you know. That's why, people go back to abusive relationships. It's unfortunately where they feel naturally comfortable, even if they don't want to be there. So that was that. My world had fallen apart, and I'd got through it, and so I knew I could probably do it again. And I think that, again, the second time, when I'd taken on a company, turned it around, sold it to a parent business, and we got on like a house on fire, me and the CEO, and I was there for another 4 years, and then the market collapsed, and that caused a lot of tension in the business. And at some point, she got sick of hearing what I had to say, and I left the business. But again, I made something of it. I had survival instincts, and actually it was the best thing ever. So it's this kind of, it's good to face into your demons. Right. And, I always have this motto that nothing, and I'm sure it can be for some people, but generally speaking, I think it's going to be this bad. And actually it's only this bad, really. Yeah. The rest of it's in here. This too shall pass. Yeah. As somebody I don't know once said. So I think that's instrumental, is that bit in the early career was actually my biggest fear came true. And then I realized actually there's still life after it. And, and if I continue to engage in the way that I wanted to, and pursue this thing about being human and use my personal relationships to do that, then it'll, I'll make good of it.
Right. Wow. I mean, you just touched upon so many incredible points, which, essentially the daily life of every single human being. One thing I've seen somewhere, and I've always thought this, and it goes straight into the point you're saying, nothing is ever as bad as it seems, and nothing is ever as good as it seems. It always falls out and lines up in the middle. But a lot of times, during the period of going through it, you're like, holy hell, the whole world's falling apart. Everything is, breaking loose. Everyone's out there to get me. You start harboring all those resentments and everything over there, and you're like, it's that fault. But then we forget to take responsibility. But at the end of the day, when you step out of that zone, you're like, wait, that wasn't so bad. I made it out alive. Like you said, the world did not fall apart. You
Yeah.
know, the world does not revolve around me. I'm a one person here that's trying to contribute to the bigger part of society to make a difference. But everything, it's a very important thing to matter that like if you get laid off or something else happens, you will make it out. You will, and it'll be
Yeah.
okay. Like there's a diagram that's going around that shows the careers. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. You're that typical thing going through that. People think that career when they see a CEO, for example, or a founder, and they only see the end journey. But they don't realize there's a whole 20-year previous journey where, for example, by fighting through, self-confidence, imposter syndromes, getting laid off, going up, going down, things like that. At the same time, you also had defining moments and everything. I mean, every single human being needs to know about this whole entire thing because we all deal with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome now today?
I guess I've been through so many iterations of self-doubt, um, that you kind of, it just becomes like a jacket that you slip on and slip off, Um, I I've spent so much of my early years. So for example, when I moved jobs, that that second time, or the first time, whenever, in fact, whenever anything goes well, but certainly career wise, I would immediately start thinking something's, literally, I'm going to get ill and I'm going to die, or something along this. It sounds ridiculous, but that's the sort of thing that you go through. Something's going to take it away the next day, and actually, it's quite exhausting. But the one advantage of being older and getting older, and having worked for 32 years now, is that you see the pattern, right? You self doubt, something happens, you think it's going to go this way, and it didn't. And I survived all of those iterations, and here I am today, and love my job, and love the opportunity to do these kind of things and speak out about what I think is important. So it's really just now, I've come to terms with it, and it's, of course, still get those moments. Still get those moments where I'm stretched or challenged, or I'm sure there'll be another moment in my career or at some point where something's really important to me, and or I'm with somebody or someone's challenging me, and that will undermine my self-confidence again. But I've been through it so many times that I've just got a toolkit to deal with it and ignore it. And I feel I value myself now more. I value my skills. I've stopped making allowances and accommodating other people's judgment of me.
Right.
And there's a saying, and I can't remember the words, but it basically says, don't allow people to make you feel the way you do, because that's what you do. You end up, being shaped and responding to certain people. So, whereas, I'm a very, very easygoing person, but, whereas in previous worlds, I would work or engage with people who, would challenge me or make me feel less of a person or whatever it is. I just don't engage with those people anymore.
Right.
I'm open to people talking, and I'm open to criticism, and I have critical friends, and it's not to do with that. It's not to do with trying to just create this bubble that I'm brilliant or anything like that. It's just that some people, can undermine you, and make you then take all of this sort of negative energy and responsibility on your shoulders. And it's like, well, no, I am who I am. So, and my beliefs are my beliefs, and they resonate with some people and they don't resonate with others. It doesn't really matter. I will navigate towards an environment that I think helps me,
Right.
and where I can help others. So, yeah, it's a case of I've worn the jacket so many times now.
It's
I
like,
can tell the difference between my jacket and someone else's. So thanks, I'll just take it off for now. It's hard, you have your moments, but
right.
you know, once,
It's like, as human beings, like, at the end of the day, we're all human. You know, you're human, I'm human, everyone else, we're all human. We all have our own, emotional baggage, emotional desires, our own issues that come together with it, you know, and we always associate, we have to realize that whoever to make a difference, their career, their title, everything like that, they're human at the end of the day. Everyone's human. And, to get blinded by something external is no point in it. And people that are, that are wearing their externalness on the outside only shows a lack of internal what's going on inside. It's something funny while you're talking. I mean, so many different things coming to my mind, but there's one thing, would you ever judge someone else as hard as you judge yourself? Right? So it's very easy for us, like, to beat ourselves up, like, and ready to have all these self doubts like that. Would you ever think of that on someone else? Would you ever judge them that harshly? We have to learn how to be kind to ourselves. It's like to be kind,
Mhm.
to take care of ourselves, to appreciate ourselves, to listen to that voice when it comes inside, the anxiousness, the anxiety, the insecurities. It's trying to teach us a lesson when it comes into us.
Mm.
And it's not something that a lot of times, we run away from these feelings of fear, feelings of stress. We bury it down, we throw it away. You know,
Yeah,
it's a,
no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really strong point in that, over the years, there's been this growing narrative when I started, probably 10 years into my career, when companies were pretending even harder that people mattered. They started talking about bringing your whole self to work, um, which probably started 20 years ago or more. And they really don't. I don't think they really knew what they were saying, right? Because they didn't and haven't really wanted you to bring your whole self to work. And I think that is incredibly important. So in my business, in the business, in the Head Start organization, we have a kind of a mantra, which is, from my perspective, that there's an order of things that are important. And, for most of my career, I wouldn't say I was a company man, because that's a kind of an old fashioned term, and it's probably more akin to my father's generation. But, very much the company comes first, and because that pays the bills and, etc. And in fact, that's how I started my career, thinking I've got to keep the job. No matter what happens, I have to keep that job, because the job and the salary allows me to live a life and everything else. And actually, that kind of approach probably cost me my marriage. So, or at least contributed to the fact that I wasn't around enough. I didn't see my kids enough, etc. I was tired and so on. So I think it's the opposite way around. And, again, I'm sure people will disagree with me, but my time has told me that, and has manifests itself in our approach at Head Start, which is, for me, the most important thing is that you, as someone who works in Head Start, be their best self, right? Physically and mentally. And that doesn't mean I'm interested in or I have to know what you're doing physically and mentally to make you sure you're your best self. But that's my objective, is to make sure that that's your top priority. So that you are, you find the working pattern that suits you as an individual. So that's times and place. You fit it around your life in a way that suits you, and you look after yourself and do whatever it is to make sure you are the absolute best you can be as a person, for you, not for the company, but for you as an individual. And if you do that, then you'll turn up to your team as the best you. And if everybody did that, we'd have a team of best yous, best thems. And if that was the case, that team would then bring its best, absolute best to the company.
right.
And that is the order in which it should happen. Unfortunately, for most of my working career, it's been the other way around. Company comes first, then your team, then you. And in the context of the best you, it is absolutely what you described. The whole human being, whatever you are, I don't want you to be disguising it or masking it or suppressing it or anything. I mean, clearly there are some things you might want to keep confidential, but if that's the case, just let me know. We'll organize something around it. But I don't want anybody to feel that they are anything other than their authentic selves in the workplace. And I believe this is absolutely important. And especially from a leadership perspective,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be an authentic person, and you have to allow people to be their authentic selves, because that's when they feel most comfortable. We're all the same. When have you felt at your sort of in the most flow, where you feel like you're doing your best or whatever. It's a combination of whole sort of things, even down to the way you dress, right? I'll dress in something that, and I wear black t-shirts and jeans. That's all I wear. I'm known for it, right? I've done for 20 years. I'm most comfortable when I'm in a black t-shirt and jeans, and in a certain thing, doing a certain way. And when all those little pieces are lined up, I am actually, it's a bit noisy that, when all those things are lined up, I am on my game. And why am I on my game? Because I'm not conforming in any way. I'm not saying, oh, well, I'm going to go and have a good day, but actually I'll put a suit on because I have to put a suit. I'm not 100% comfortable in it, but I'll do it. I'm going to go in today, but I need to get up at 5:30, and that's really bad time for me, but I'm going to get up 5:30 every day and get a train into, all of these little micro adjustments that we make to fit into this kind of construct that we've created around work. All they seek to do, in my view, is just chip away at the real you.
Right.
And, when we say we want your whole self at work, when we say people are our greatest asset, when we say we want to create an environment that is inclusive and, and fosters belonging, that means, handing everything over to the individual. You show up how you need to show up, and that brings the best out in you. Because then I know I will get the best out of that person. We will get the best out of each other and we'll deliver. And in 32 years, I've researched this and I've talked to people. I've, worked in hierarchical organizations. I've talked to business leaders who behave that way. And then I've gone the other end of the spectrum. And I've run businesses myself, and I've run it in a slightly more autocratic way than I do now in history, run my teams in a way like that. And I can tell you, after all that time, and maybe I'm a little bit stupid, but after all that time, I haven't changed my mind one bit.
Right.
The way to go is, people, treat them like adults, create a great environment for them, let them be themselves, make sure they look after themselves, enable that, give them great feedback, engage with the positive in them, and also help them through the other bits. I can't tell you in all that research I've done, I found any different way.
Wow. It, and this it's so important, and this definitely, such an approach is a top-down approach. Starts from leadership and down.
Yeah. Yeah,
Leadership.
the fish rots from the head. It's my favorite saying. And
Yeah.
there are all these excuses. I watched a video the other day. It was a TikTok video. It's very short, and it was I can't remember who the actor's name was, but he was being interviewed by somebody, and they said to him, "What's the biggest lie you've ever been told?" And he said, "It's not that simple." And the person interviewing him said, "What do you mean?" Thinking that he was criticizing the question. He said, no, that's the biggest lie I've ever been told. It's not that simple. And that was just like, boom, because that's what you hear when you challenge these constructs we've got today. Oh, it's not that simple. We need to do a transformation. We need to move this. Oh, it's just not that simple. We need to think about COVID, pre-COVID. We should really be thinking about employing, flexible working in the place and giving people the opportunity to work. No, it's just not that simple. No, it just can't be done here. It's just not that simple. And it's just utter nonsense.
Right.
We are getting in the way of these great things. And unfortunately, that's, as a culture, as a way of working, has prevailed for a very, very long time. And I'm hopeful that COVID has been a bit of a shift to make us start questioning all of this. But it's this, we build up this complexity that allows us to say we shouldn't do this, we can't do that. It's not just simple, and it is. From a leadership perspective, it all sits at your door, and it is not complicated for you to either take a different path and embrace this stuff, or move aside and let someone else. Because there are many examples of turnarounds where, if you look at the really good turnaround, somebody didn't come in and spend hours poring over finances and looking at share prices and, doing structure charts and doing that. They kind of just walked in and they said to the organization, hey, we're in a bit of a mess, guys. And this is, we're in it together. How do we do it? If you look at some of those really good culture change stories, the leader stepped in and stepped up and was a human leader and got people on side, got their trust. There's several examples of it. And leaders are not good at doing that. Our current crop, they're not good at doing that. And I think that's, we need as professionals, HR professionals particularly, need to hold the mirror up to the leadership and say, there's problems in this organization, and in reality, the problem stems from leadership, i.e. you.
And it's so true. Like the leader, let's say a company's going through a difficult time. Most times the leader, the first thing they're going to do is, okay, let me look at the sales numbers. Let me look and say, why is sales numbers not up to par? And then, okay, let me look at the sales team. Let me look at the process. But you're missing the first point of the whole entire thing. Why don't you go to the salesperson and ask him, hey, how are things at home? How's your relationship with your whatever relationship you're in? How's your relationship with your friends, your family? Are you going through a difficult personal time? Are you going through some type of addiction, challenge, whatever else it may be? Because at the end of the day, it's not the fact that I'm showing up to work, I'm motivated. It's my first step is something's wrong with me that I'm going through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And
totally.
we miss that key point because, work is something, it's what we do. It's not who we are. Right. But most times we show up to work at our whole life is work. But we have this whole entire other thing over here. And we have to make this whole thing over here, which is our personal life, of who we are as a human being to develop and grow. Because when we grow there, most times we grow and work if we're in a place that's a great environment to help us foster the growth and everything like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many ways, and like you mentioned, I think to a certain degree we have to take the whole work down, the whole work atmosphere currently how it is now, crumble it and build it up from new again.
No, I think you're right. The best, my examples, and I can only show it, is where people, it goes back to, like Joe, my guy from my first job. He was successful because he took a human approach. He was interested. And, if I was walking into a business tomorrow that wasn't performing and I was the incoming CEO, the first thing I'd want to know is, what's our approach to people in the business, and I'd be going to people in the organization saying, what do you think of the leadership? Yeah. What do you think of the way this company is run? And I'd be talking to everybody, the person on the shop floor, the cleaner, the managers, everybody else. And I'd be saying, what do you think's wrong with the business? Where are we going wrong? And I would ask everybody that question. And I'd repeat myself over and over and over again and say, look, you can be as honest as you like. And there's the problem, when you start asking those questions on the back of previous history, quite often people don't tell you. Right. They'll do an engagement survey and tell you that it's a 5 out of 10 from a culture perspective, but very few people then will be prepared to commit to writing on that questionnaire why it's a 5 out of 10. Because they fear, oh, if somebody knows I said that, I'll get the sack, all these kind of things. And, 99%, there've been TV programs, Troubleshooter, what's that one where the Hidden Boss, all of these programs on TV where the Undercover Boss, all of these things. When you run Peel the Onion, it's all the same thing. Decisions they make at the top, they're not connected to the rest of the business, and they're not understanding the person. Look at those programs, look at those engagements. The human ones win out. Right. And you have to understand. So if sales isn't performing, I'd want to know, I would be immediately thinking it's either something wrong with the product, we haven't equipped them well enough, or the sales leaders not getting the most out of it. But also, if you're, as an individual, you're not functioning as well as a salesperson, as a person, then you're not going to bring your best to the team. And I do believe that we have to take a more human approach to, we called it human resources when I was in the profession, and it's almost like become not human resources. For a function to have the name of human resources, you look at the narrative that goes along with the HR function, You even get things like, yeah, I don't consider myself as an HR leader. I consider myself as a business person with a specialism in HR. It's like, what are you talking about? What kind of nonsense is that? That's almost like saying I'm a bit embarrassed about being a people person. I'm embarrassed about the HR bit because first and foremost, I'm commercial. I get the numbers because that's what matters. That's what gets me a seat at the table. This HR bit, the fluffy bit's not my main card. Well, you know what? If you're not prepared to put it on as your main thing, that I am a person who's embedded in people, then get out of the profession, right? It's a people profession. People, we need to understand our people better. We need CEOs and CFOs and CMOs and SVPs of logistics or whatever. They need to stop talking, stop counting numbers and start talking to their teams as being more human. And the fact that the human resources profession has been dancing around the fire for decades and, you know, trying to make itself appear more commercial, to make itself more accepted, it's nonsense. And even, you know, been talking about HR getting a seat at the table and being more commercial every year for 32 years. And we're still talking about it. You know, it's a human, it's the profession that's supposed to understand the nuances of people and help leadership understand that. And right now I see, you know, I've seen over the years this kind of almost like, I don't want to be known as an HR person. I want to be known as a commercial animal, as someone who really understands business. And I am got the, you know, I've got the HR backpack to carry. Well, you know, that isn't HR. You know, people are business. Without the people in the business, you're stuffed. You can talk about your product. You can talk about your own genius as a CEO because you've come from XYZ company and you turned a business around there. But there isn't a product or service out there that wasn't delivered by somebody's idea and then somebody's careful hands to craft it, someone to market it, someone to, etc. You know, so we owe our people a lot.
Right. Wow.
And we don't recognize it.
So then, what does the future of work look like for you? Uh,
Big question.
Because you know, you talk about. I mean, I'm with you 100%. We need a change. You know, and like you're right. If you look at most human resource officers, it's all about, you know, like it's a commercial thing. It is, and it's like, how can I make it to the top of the ladder? Um, and every other aspect within the workforce culture, a lot it's all about like how can I get promoted, you know? And then you have the internal politics and the bullshit and like that, and the other types of things. But like, how do we make what's the future work look like to make this environment where I can show up with my heart on my sleeve? I could walk in today and say, hey guys, I had a hard time, let's say, at home last night, and therefore I'm out of my best today.
Mm.
Or, you know, I have my kid's recital. Let me go. I want to go join that. Or I have my friend's birthday party, or whatever else it may be. But how do we create an environment of work that I can show up as my full self?
Yeah, I think the only way that can happen is with a fundamental shift in leadership attitudes. And what the next 5 to 10 years is going to be really interesting because, you know, I've no doubt that, you know, 20 years time, which will be hopefully beyond the point at which I've retired, there will be, you know, work will be more flexible. It'll be more human. It'll be more these things. Because I think generally speaking, there's a trajectory, right? There's a macro. It's far more, you know, just things like, you know, dress. Organizations are far more informal and probably a bit more with the people program now than they were 30 years ago. So this is a general direction of travel. But it would have taken 20 years. And, you know, for that to happen, and certainly around flexibility and so on. And COVID has shortened that 20-year timeline by 19 years, right? So boom, on one aspect, one key aspect of work and the relationship with work, which is around this, you know, commuting, structured working day. The problem with that shortening it by 19 years is that we've got the leaders that we've got today that have these frameworks of control or frameworks of 9 to 5, frameworks of the way we are. they would have moved on, retired, or their frameworks would have retired over the next 20 years. And, people would have come through with slightly more, as always does, each generation of leadership brings its own. And I think it's going in that direction. So now we've got this, as I called it, it's this tectonic plate shift, boom. And that's caused sort of leadership tsunamis and leadership earthquakes everywhere, because all of a sudden we've taken their limited beliefs about what is possible and blown it out of the water.
Right.
And they've had to embrace it. And some have gone, well, yeah, I didn't believe this would work beforehand, but it has now, and that's actually amazing. And yeah, well, maybe I'm prepared to think differently, and maybe this is the future, and they'll walk on. But it's a tiny proportion of those people. The rest are confused or sitting there going, I don't like this, because although we say the world of work has changed, that's the only context that's changed, right? Everything else is the same. The leaders are the same they were 18 months ago. Their attitudes are the same. You look at this in amongst this whole working debate, where will you work, whatever. The working day is still seen as the same. There's a lot of people I know who have been, under a lot of pressure, even though working at home, to make sure they're on between 9 and 5, right? Even though they might have challenges at home. There's the construct of presence, be present in a certain place hasn't melted away. So we've got all of these, we're still hanging on to these constructs, even though we can't control the people. So that I think is going to create a huge challenge for a lot of these leaders, because these leaders are, CEOs these days are, tall. So we tend to take tall people. They're men, largely speaking. A lot of them have come from, from finance. They're financial people. COOs make the natural choice, isn't it? Either a really good senior operator or a financial person. The FD becomes the CEO. And they've had these behaviors around control and hierarchy. These people have been schooled to the point that they are today.
Right.
And that, in my view, is the wrong schooling and approach for what we need for the world of work that's been dropped into us 19 years early. Mm-hmm. So you haven't got a hope in hell of trying to change the organization without the buy-in and the leadership at the top end. So we're going to go through a year or a couple of years, I think, where we're going to have to triage these leaders through it. And if HR is going to have a role, it needs to be the tough coach. It needs to stand up and be counted and say, right, Mr. CEO, we do need to embrace this, and we need to go even further, right? We hang on to your hat. We need to give people full flexibility, remove the hierarchy, engage our people, build their trust, treat them like adults. And when these CEOs say, no, it's complete rubbish, they need to say, it isn't rubbish. Here's the mirror again, and you're in the driving seat. Or they need to leave the company and go somewhere where they can make that happen. So the answer to a more, people-oriented, whole self at work, better working environments, it sits with those CEOs and their immediate teams, but ultimately sits with the CEO. And some of those people, and I don't even know how many, but I'm going to say quite a lot of them, are going to find that shift very, very difficult, because it is a complete, about turn from everything they've been schooled and know in terms of leadership and leader behavior. They've got to change some fundamental habits. Now, the interesting thing is they've probably for the last 10 years been reading report after report after report and going to event after event after event run by McKinsey and Harvard and Stanford and all of those organizations, telling them that organizations that run like this and that their people and engage diversity and you're going to outperform, you will get more revenue, do all this and do all that. And yet, what do they do about it? They do nothing. They ignore the reports. They don't bite into it. But, that moment I think is now coming. COVID, despite all the negativity it brought and the destruction and bad things for a lot of people, it took one of the biggest limited beliefs of leadership and disproved it. Right. And proved that the reason we're not making these changes isn't because we physically can't, isn't because big organizations can't do that, isn't because X, Y, and Z. It's simply because the leadership chose to ignore it because they didn't believe. That is it. You can argue all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, if I'm the CEO of a blue chip, in multinational business, I can make those changes or I cannot. It's that simple.
Wow. And a lot of it, is sometimes when leadership buys into their own self. Like, I'm the leader, I'm this, I made it, and not thinking that, along your career path, you had multiple different types of pivots, multiple people helping you along the way. And, when you remember that and thinking, wait, you have the opportunity as a leader now from all the help you've got when you were rising up the ladder to help the people in your organization out to help them rise up, putting them first, everything will take care of itself. You know, it, sales don't happen by itself. If you're able to take care of your people within your organization, automatically what happens? Your culture will become good. If your culture becomes good, automatically sales will happen because people are motivated to work. It's people, people, people. And like you said, COVID expedited the whole entire process. And putting organizations, and at the forefront of everything. It's the most important thing. So you in your career, you had, multiple different pivots, a lot of failures, a lot of self doubt, rejection, insecurities, imposter syndrome. At the same time, you also had people like Joe that gave you that that gave you a whole new paradigm shift to work. And then working at another company, you had multiple different paradigm shifts. So you had both spectrums. You
Mm.
know, what lessons can you take? You learn from that, and you can apply to give to others.
I suppose the one, and I don't know whether ultimately this is a personality thing or what, but um, I I guess I sought out and saw people like Joe, and my gut was telling me that this just made sense, and so I found, and in those days it was when I came through the leadership of a guy like him, I started to look around for other examples, and got very curious about how good organizations ran and so on. But it was difficult then. The internet didn't exist, so you had to go to the library or read a magazine or find a book. But over time, I found good examples. I found Ricardo Semler and Semco, and his book Maverick, which again was a defining point in my life. It's one of my favorite books of all time. One of the best business books of all time, one of the best HR practitioner reads of all time. It's absolutely essential reading, and he was doing things that we're considering doing now and thinking are sort of leading edge people stuff. Even some of the things we're not considering doing now because we think it's a leap too far, he was doing nearly 40 years ago. So I think that validation over the years of looking at those things and seeing them, because 20, 25 years ago, people would just say, yeah, but they're a special case. They're an outlier. Can't happen here. And I've learned that it can. And I think so. The lesson one for me all through my life has been, my gut is there and tells me, trust your gut is number one. Feed it with information, check it, sense check it. But trust your gut, because what my gut was really telling me was drawing me to something that where I would be successful, where it would resonate with me, right? Because that's what you're doing. That's what it's, I guess, saying is I was looking at the way Joe was behaving and others and going, I get that. That makes total sense to me. I will work hard for this guy. But because he trusts me and I trust him and all of those things. And I think that was really important to me. That's an important lesson I've learned is that, my gut, I always go on my gut. I will then feed it with data depending on what's going on. But, if I smell a rat, there's a rat generally. And if I feel good about something, then I'm going to pursue it, even though I don't have the data, but I will try and back it up with data. So I think that's that's a key learning for me is, it's important for me to follow my intuition
Right.
around these things, and don't accommodate or stick around where people are. I mean, it's important to feed your mind with other people's perspectives, don't get me wrong, but don't flog a dead horse, as they say. I've learned now not to spend or invest too much time in overly trying to make the point around these things. And to people who don't believe, I will listen to them, and let's come on the journey. But I have enough evidence and I have enough faith that there's a human beings will actually, largely speaking, do their best if you give them the room to do it, and you support them, and you stop trying to micromanage them and make decisions for them and everything else, and actually you embrace them as a whole individual. The jury's back in on that one in my mind. So I think there's probably a couple of things, and believe in yourself,
Right.
because it's like they say, you can't love anyone else unless you truly love yourself. And it's the same with belief and all of those things. You're so easy to run yourself down, or think that you're not, to look at somebody else and think you wish you had what they got and all those things. But at the end of the day, we all have that opportunity. You've just got to have faith in yourself a bit, and people are much stronger than they give themselves credit for. We just live in a society, generally speaking, where that strength isn't tested very often, and you'll find it. You just don't let these things undermine. Self-belief, I think, is really important.
Right. I'm blown away. Like, I have no words. Like, emotionally, I'm feeling it all. Um, and you touch upon, like, the daily struggles of us, what it means to be human beings, and what it means to be a human being within the workforce, and work everything else, and how we confuse it too. You know, um, learning how to show, as you said, show up as your true self, believe in yourself. You know, as human beings, it works like this: you have something I don't have, and I have something you don't have, and that could be a personal trait or something. And when we come together,
Yeah,
I become your supporter, you become my supporter, and then we're able to create a third thing which is much bigger than us. And if we learn how to do that, within the workforce, quote unquote, right? Which the whole workforce thing, is a whole separate, get into that later, the whole conversation. But
yeah,
like,
yeah,
when we learn how to treat each other with respect, show up. There's all these gimmicks. Let's get this sale. Let's do this gimmicks and sales and marketing and things like that. End of the day, you're human. I'm human. Let's get on the phone. Hey, if I need it, I need it. If I don't need it, I don't need it. That's it. Simple like that. Why do we have to play all these shtick and games and everything?
mm,
Human to human. But like you said, show up as your true self. Show up as who you are. Know that you could grow. Know that yes, I have weaknesses. Find the company that's able to support your growth and to help you. I mean, these are the most important things. Like, so as a, but at the same time, these are the most important things, and also but a lot of times, working in a workforce, um, this is all, it takes, like, we think we put our career first sometimes. Most times we put our career first. We're taught, we're brought up in society that, like you mentioned in the beginning, you went through your own personal journey. For example, your dad got laid off and you had to go through that difficult times, which set an impression within you that you need security, you need financial security, right? Which made you work, get into, I guess, workaholism, and to apply yourself before that, make that before everything, which, like you mentioned before, affected your family life.
yeah,
How do we do that? And then we still have them, and that mindset's still there today. People want that security. People are like, I need that security because you know what? And it's like we expect our partners to know that, like, we're doing this for you because we need to have that security. But
yeah,
really, it should be flipped. And I mean,
yeah. No, absolutely. I think this is a really important dynamic, because I grew up like thinking that in the world of work, because of my relationship with work and my relationship with the company and my boss and the nature of work, the construct of work at the time. And it's really unhealthy. I did good work, but the work, was it all at its best? And because really my life was over here, my work was over here, and never the twain shall meet. But I was obsessed with keeping my job, so I worked longer hours and what have you. And and I, of course I realized a lot probably a bit too late. Not that was a single reason, of course, but you realize actually the currency of success and a fulfilling life is love. It's not it's not money. And but we have a society that drills into us this this thing. And I think the onus is on leaders to create environments where their team can put their life first, or create a life that allows allows the notion of a work-life balance to exist, right? There's some people work for me who've got young children, and 2, 3, 4 years old, and I look at that and I think my kids are 21 and 18 now, and I look at those folks and I don't want them to do what I did. I don't want them coming home at 8 o'clock at night just when the kids are going to bed. And I wanted to say goodnight to my kids, but then it would wake them up a bit, and that would be a bone of contention between me and my ex-wife, and or I missed out on time with them at tea time, and the days that I did get home early or whatever, it was just amazing because I'll be around for tea. And I want that to be normal, not exceptional, for the people in my team, because I know how good it feels, and they will then grow up without they won't have these things in their back of their mind. Well, I really should be working. I really should be on the laptop. I've spent far too much time sitting in the lounge with my kids with the telly on, pretending to try and be with them, but not being present because I'm trying to do work at the same time. And, that's just not on, because they take that with them.
Sure.
Right? This is the problem. Everything I grew up with, I brought with me, and they will take that with them. At some point, probably my son and daughter, when they have kids, unless they learn this lesson, they will too be not present when their kids are growing up, and they won't realize that until it's too late. Yeah. And for me, I think that's we have a responsibility as leaders to create an environment. I think it's a huge responsibility that we don't think about. We've got this responsibility to the company and the shareholders. No, you have a responsibility. This is almost like a societal responsibility to this organization and the people in it, to make them realize that actually, delivering good work and all of those things are outcomes of getting this bit right, which is being a whole human, being one that, as Ricardo Semler, that guy, he wrote a book, he's got a principle which became the title of his second book, and it was called The 7-Day Weekend. And he's basically, the premise was, look, in today's world, I'm expected to, as a worker, I can easily be expected to spend my Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning or whatever, when I should be at home with my kids, writing a report. But I can't then go and take my son to the cinema on a Tuesday afternoon. Right. And to him, that was just like, doesn't make any sense. Why don't we just allow people to do what they want when they want? And of course, everybody thought the guy was nuts and said he would go out of business, and said, this won't work here and not in my backyard. And of course, it hasn't. They've become the most successful company in Brazil. He must have, I don't know, I think there's a 2-year waiting list to go and visit Semco, to go and hear them we'll walk around the place, and and we're still just locked into this, like it's weak. It's like a weakness. This is it. It's almost like if you're a leader that goes down that path, it's weakness because you're not controlling everything. It's weakness because you're allowing people to surface non-work things and allow to certain emotions. This goes back, decades. This goes back to, like armed forces. Don't show weakness, stiff upper lip, be strong, and strength comes from within. Strength comes from health and love and happiness and all of those things. That's what makes you resilient, truly resilient. And we just need to nurture that as individuals. And certainly from my perspective, if I could have my time back again, I would make sure I learned that lesson from the beginning, because I know actually now that, I went down certain journeys because I felt I had to go down those journeys in pursuit of work and keeping my work, and to try and, make sure this was whole. But actually that pursuit of that journey was undermining this all the time. And actually what I should have done is I should have put this lot first. And then the world order would have worked around me. I would have gone down another path. I may not have worked in the companies that I worked in, but actually, I think I would still have done fine. I might even done better, because I would have been more authentic me. Right. And I would have been a richer person, because I'd probably still be married, or I'd probably, I would have seen more of my children. I would have had a much better internal benchmarking of what actually life was about. And as a result, I think I would have showed up better. I worked hard, I put in a lot of hours and everything else. But I think I would, if I'd have been thinking in a very different mindset, I reckon I'd have showed up even better. Right. Because I was complete, if you want to use a term. And yeah, to some people, this is just going to sound, soft and fluffy and not important. But the one advantage of leaving the HR profession and working in commercial jobs, like running sales teams and running businesses and trying to do turnarounds and things, and being in the CEO chair now, I'm not the CEO of GlaxoSmithKline. I'm not running one of the Fortune 500. But the advantage of being in the CEO seat versus HR is that it works. I can tell you, it's, I run the business this way, treat my people like humans. I'm interested in them. I want them to put themselves first. It's never questioned when someone's got a challenge or an issue, the company's there for them, and they must put themselves first. They must take downtime if they need it. People can take as much time off as they want. I don't care. I don't measure holidays. I make sure that people take them. We don't give them allowance on holiday. It's just whatever you make the work pattern. And, I couldn't ask for a better, more motivated, more on-side team who do fantastic work.
Right.
And I don't see why that can't be done in every company on the planet. I think we'd be a lot better for it. But the question is, do we have the right leaders in place who can embrace that and make it happen? My feeling is that we don't.
When after 120 years, when we go up to heaven, they're not going to come and ask us, hey, why didn't you work harder? The question is going to be, what impact have you made for your family? Why haven't, why didn't you live up to your true personal self, whatever that is? And each person has their own mission, what they need to accomplish and do. But why have you why have you not lived up to that? And the same with, I think, if you do, I think there's multiple different studies of people going to hospices and old age homes and nursing homes and everything, where they ask people, what have you found satisfaction in your life? And, I think 99% of it is always about the relationships I have with people.
Yeah, totally.
My family, my friends, my better half, whatever it is. And we have this data, and we know this data, and we've been talking about it for years, and we preach it, but we do nothing with it.
Yes, exactly.
This is something that we have to change and work on. And like you said, it starts from leaders and down, and goes further and further and further, until it goes to the doorman. And I always say, you want to know how, this is my personal belief, you want to know how it's like to work at a company, you don't want to know who someone is, see how they treat the janitor, see how they treat the doorman. If they give a pleasant hello, they give something, a good word, you're in a good place. If it's something like I'm here and you're there, then you're doing an egotistical, maniac.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly that. How do they treat everybody? What's the perception in the business, and how do those people feel about being there? You know, they're the people who do the deliverable at the end of the day.
Right.
And what do they feel about it? It just, people speak volumes when they can.
It's incredible. I know, Gareth, this is going to help so many people. Um, I learned a tremendous amount. You know, I feel emotionally charged and emotionally, motivated and also triggered at the same time. It brought out so much of me. But like, there's so many things within here. Like, people think that career is just one linear path, and if you stay at it and you push at it, I'm going to make it to the top. So first thing we know that it's not. It's full of different pivots. It's full of, you know, insecurities. It's full of, different types of other emotional distresses, and it's ups and downs, and you always have to push yourself forward. At the same time, don't get lost and caught in that bubble of thinking it's all about the career. No, put your family first. Show up as a human being first. Take care of the people around you. Your career is a secondary thing, and if you have this part first, then your career also, as long as you put in the right work, it will go forward. Another lesson I learned is like be the pioneer within your organization in order to make it human first. You know, make it a place of human connection. Make it a place that, if you were to get stuck on an island somewhere in Timbuktu, you want your coworker to be there together with you and hang out with them. You know. So I personally want to thank you so much. I've learned a tremendous amount. There's no doubt this is going to be beneficial to people that are going through either their own career pivot, or leaders that are looking to how to transform the organization after this whole entire period right now. But this has been absolutely amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
No, you're welcome. It's been great. I love to, I love to talk about this stuff, and it's been great to chat. And thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts with the world. So yeah, it's been great. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.